And so I'll now hand over to Maggie for her keynote presentation, after which we will have a Q&A session with her. So if you have any questions for Maggie, please use the questions tab on the platform. So Maggie, it's now over to you, please. Thank you.
Craig, thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here speaking to you today, and it's a particular pleasure to be working with an organisation who sees the merit in putting rail freight first on the agenda and not in our usual place, which is last on the agenda or possibly just after lunch. So it's particularly delightful for me to be speaking to you here today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Maggie Simpson and I lead the Rail Freight Group. We are a UK-based trade association and we represent businesses across the rail freight sector. That includes train operators, end customers, people who produce equipment for the rail sector, so locomotives, wagons, handling equipment, rail link ports and terminals, people who are looking to build new terminals and new facilities for rail freight, and a whole host of support services. And our aim as an organisation is to increase the volume of goods that are moved by rail freight in the UK, because we know the environmental and economic benefits that that can deliver. It's perhaps particularly fitting that I'm speaking to you today, because in the UK, the Rail Secretary of State Grant Shapps has just announced significant changes to the way that the passenger railway will run in this country. We've already had temporary contracts through the COVID lockdown so far. They've been extended, but put onto a basis that will end the previous structure of franchising and looking to move towards a new contract structure in due course. So there's a lot of talk in the press today about the passenger railway, but actually for us in freight, it's business as usual. We run and operate in the private sector, our contracts stay the same, and we really need a railway that puts us at the heart of it. So it's even more timely to be talking about rail freight today and about what we need to go forwards into the future. So why do I believe that rail freight is a strategic imperative for the UK? I've highlighted 5 reasons here. First of all, the challenge of decarbonising the economy isn't getting any easier. The deadline of 2050, when the UK government is committed to net zero carbon, is coming round quicker than you'd think. And carbon emissions continue to rise from transport. And actually what we've seen across COVID is a push back onto the road transport network as people have turned their back on public transport. So it becomes ever more challenging to decarbonise transport. But we know that today, modal shift to rail freight produces 76% less carbon dioxide than road for an equivalent trip in the UK. In fact, it's even better in Europe, where more of the railways are electrified. But today, if we can take a lorry off the road, we're helping that decarbonisation narrative. And we're also pushing hard at government to help us decarbonise even further, to make more use of the electric traction that we have and to make a plan for the future. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. Secondly, of course, we have at the end of the Brexit transition period in January, and whatever we think of how those negotiations are carrying on, it seems likely that people will start to move their trade in different ways and through different routes than they did before. Government is also chasing new free port zones. There's been a big consultation on that, and we're expecting more developments later in the year from there. And this means that the ports around the UK will need excellent inland links by road and by rail to support UK exporters and businesses who are trying to adapt to those new trading arrangements. If our trade with the Americas increases, that might bring ports on the West Coast into more focus. If we are moving more goods on lift on, lift off rather than roll on, roll off, that brings other ports into play. And rail freight has a really big opportunity in helping those ports to facilitate that trade. Job creation, we know that rail freight growth is good for that. A strategic rail freight interchange might create 6,000 or 7,000 jobs all over the country. So not only is it creating jobs, it's helping rebalance the economy, and it's also driving productivity through cost-effective rail links out to the hinterland. And we're supporting the construction of new infrastructure. So building infrastructure is a key part of economic recovery. We've already seen the first trains helping to build a new HS2 railway. The first construction trains for that ran a couple of weeks ago, continue to run now. But the roads building, house building, whatever we're delivering, whatever we're building in terms of new infrastructure, rail freight can help to support that. And so as government looks to keep the economy moving forward as we move through and beyond COVID, we know that rail freight's a really important imperative to support all of those aspects. But this conference this week is about the future, it's about decarbonisation, and it's about technology. So let's move forward from COVID to the big priorities that we have as a sector. I already touched on decarbonisation and rail freight's role in that, but I'm absolutely passionate that we make every step possible to help towards zero carbon. As I've said, modal shift to rail freight today is the single thing we can do to help decarbonise the economy, even with the current traction fleet that we have. But secondly, we can try and allow trains to use electric power more often today, because all the operators in the UK have access to some form of electric traction, but they can't always use them as much as they'd like. So we need some very small sections of the network to be electrified to allow us to use those locomotives. This includes some small links into some ports and terminals, and making sure that the power supply has got enough electricity oomph going into it to allow freight to run. And there are some parts of the rail network in the UK that need the power supply upgrading, some small sections, and then we could really use more electric traction today. Last year, we increased the amount of electric haulage by 12%. I'm really keen that we keep the pressure on to do more and more each year. But beyond that, we need to move to a rolling programme of electrification of the UK network. There's a lot of discussion around that. Network Rail have printed their own strategy for that last week, and we can see a way forward of getting the synergies of passenger and freight transport to get some of the core routes electrified to the benefit of both parts of the industry. But it needs government to start work on that in the context of an overall programme that will help to bring down costs and drive forward efficiency. And in parallel with that, if we've got that programme of overhead wires, the private sector rail freight operators can move to looking at what locomotives they wish to have for the future. Will there be straight electrics? Will there be bimodes? People are already having those conversations. That just needs to be backed by government support for the electrification of the core network. And finally, we need to think about our terminals. How will we operate those terminals in the future? And how do we decarbonise them? The cranes, the grabs, the reach stackers, and so on. So we also need to think about that. But I'm convinced that if we start work on all those areas, we can very quickly make some very real progress on decarbonising rail freight, as well as by driving modal shift onto rail today. And then what about innovation and digitisation? The picture that you have there, I've shamelessly stolen from Craig's website. It's a digital automated coupler which is on test in Germany. It's not something that we've yet seen in the UK, but there's a big programme across Europe to try and prototype and test the rollout of such technologies. And what I've seen in the last 5 years is a real step forward in the rail freight sector to embracing digital and other innovations, technology across all our operations. For those of you who spend your life doing cutting edge, state-of-the-art technology, you may think the rail freight sector is stuck in the past. And perhaps there have been some areas where that might have been true 5 years ago. But what I've seen is a real move into areas such as remote monitoring, a more digitised technology to help run the business, better customer information, and some really innovative thinking around sensors for train loading and ways that we can transform the day-to-day operation. But what I would say so far is that that's tended to be focused on the operators and their locomotives and their equipment. And the next big journey is about the interface of those trains with an increasingly digitised network. So the rollout of digital signalling in the UK is beginning. The first programme for that East Coast Main Line South is well underway, going out to tender. And there are many people now looking at how freight best integrates with those programmes, not only the fitment of the locomotives with the necessary equipment, but how we truly get a benefit out from it in terms of capacity and efficiency. And coupled with that, looking at the wagon of the future, what is it that we want our wagons to have? And of course, a wagon, even in 20 years' time, that moves aggregates around is still going to have to handle the demands of heavy, lumpy, and often difficult to handle product. But what technology should we bring into that space, such as the couplers, such as sensors, to help that wagon be more enabled? And what benefits can we get from that digitised infrastructure and that digitised equipment? Can we get improvements in the productivity of our paths on the network? Can we run more efficiently? Can we load our trains better? Can we have better performance both from the track and the train in terms of failures, more predictive maintenance? And what will it mean for our customer information and integration? And I think that's really interesting as we see digital technology rolling out in ports and in shipping. How do we make sure that we've got that seamless and integrated supply chain that our customers want? Because our customers' focus isn't necessarily only on the railways, it's on their end-to-end journey. We need to help them make that as seamless as possible. So there's plenty of good work happening. And of course, there's plenty more to be done in coming months and years ahead. And I hope that today's conference will open the doors on some of the areas where we can make some real progress as we go forwards. So I'm going to stop now and hopefully we'll be able to have a few questions, but it just falls really for me to say that I hope that you have a very enjoyable few days conference that really starts to focus in on how we deliver some of these ambitions. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Maggie. Great insight there into what to focus on going forward. And yeah, I really think that the conference this week is really that's going to really be the key kind of discussion point, is what we need to do to move forward. So thanks there for that insight from a rail freight perspective. So yes, as you said, let's move straight on to some questions. Let's take a look here. So you obviously mentioned about Brexit, which is obviously a big concern and a big topic at the moment. What do you think are the main concerns that remain, and what will the true impact of Brexit be for rail freight, not only in the UK but elsewhere? But also, what are the biggest opportunities from Brexit? What do you think?
Yes, I mean, I think the challenge for business, whether in rail freight or anywhere in the UK economy, is uncertainty at the moment, because COVID brings a huge wave of uncertainty. People are still cautious about second wave, potential more restrictions. Where will that lead us over the winter? And that is obviously dampening businesses' appetite for investment, for recruitment. People are behaving very cautiously around doing that. And people are relying on their parent companies in some cases to help support the business through those hard times. And parent companies' pockets are so deep, but we need to help the confidence to keep investing in the UK. And so I see Brexit as at its highest level as just another factor that raises the uncertainty levels for business, because we still don't know the basis on which we will trade globally, and with not just with Europe but globally in many cases from January. So if you are looking to invest in the UK, if you're looking to put money into your port or your terminal, you've got the twin challenges of both Brexit and COVID, which give you very little solid ground on which to place a foot, and certainly on which to peg an investment decision. That said, the supply chain has shown its resilience this year. It's shown its adaptability. It's shown its determination to get goods through. And so I think that there are some functional challenges around moving goods in a new environment, the new customs regime, and so on. And that will inevitably have some bumps. But I think in the long run, those bumps will get worked out. People will find their ways through that. We're talking still about the processes necessary to make sure that trains that come to the UK through the Channel Tunnel can continue to run seamlessly. There are some, I's to dot and T's to cross, but the basic parameters are in place. But of course, we need to know what that trading arrangement is to know what the full scale of expectation is. In terms of the opportunity for rail, though, I think it's about people who will be looking to diversify their supply chains. So we've been heavily dependent on roll-on, roll-off traffic through the channel ports for a huge part of distribution for many years. And I think we'll see that spread. So we're already seeing a tick up in unaccompanied freight via different ports. And we're also seeing more people moving towards lift-on, lift-off freight. which brings more volume potentially to rail, and it brings a range of different locations into play as well. So we're already seeing volume growth on the East Coast ports as people move their European trade via that corridor. And I think we'll also see more direct calls probably at West Coast ports, which help rail freight come into that mix as well. And I think there's some interesting opportunities in free ports about the potential for inland rail terminals to form parts of free port zones, so that we could do on-site secure storage, inland customs clearance, and some of that sort of tax framework, which can come in at the same time. So I think there are some good opportunities coming forward from Brexit. We just need to get through the uncertainty to know which way we need to move to make the best of it.
Yeah, of course, thank you. And also, you know, another kind of key topic is all around sustainability and decarbonisation. So, you know, as rail freight is so vital to the supply chain, what more can the industry do to make sure that it gains market share over road freight?
Yeah.
What do you see as being how we need to shift to bring more freight onto rail?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that's really pleased me this year is that, you know, the customer ambition for rail freight growth hasn't waned. You know, I'm still getting people telling me they want more trains and more services. Oh, we need to have capacity on the network. You know, the UK network is very busy, and freight paths are sometimes hard to find. And I think, you know, we've got a lot of conversation with government at the moment with the passenger railway less well used, to see whether there are some opportunities to make a little bit more capacity for freight on the really busy routes, to try and make it easy for people then to come onto rail. It's also about making sure that we can operate productively, and that was, you know, through the worst of lockdown, you know, there wasn't much of a silver lining, but for us, we were able to run some super long trains. We've been running trains at 3/4 of a kilometre long. We're trying to get some of those made permanent so that they can keep running at that length. And we also saw some really efficient pathing of trains. So some of the trains that take, you know, run into Drax power station that ordinarily take 9 or 10 hours, we're getting there in 3 or 4 hours. And whilst we can't keep those passing with a resumed passenger railway, it just goes to prove that freight can perform at that kind of level. And so giving more efficient paths, better paths on the network can help drive productivity, reduce costs. If we've got lower costs, it makes it easier to make that modal shift.
Yeah, good. And I think a topic as well that you obviously was part of your presentation there is all about digitalisation and the way the rail freight industry can harness digital solutions to move forward. So just one last question here around what your thoughts are about the opportunities of such technologies like VR and AI. What about automatic train operation? What do you think are the biggest opportunities with new technologies?
Yeah, I always think that the thing about new technology is a bit like getting a mortgage, isn't it? You don't really realise how big it is until you do it. But so I think it can be quite hard to sit at one end of a digital technology and really understand what the benefits are. But I think there are a lot of things that the railways do in passenger and in freight, which are quite old-fashioned. You know, the way we put the timetable together, the way we look at how we run on the network, the way we know how well loaded the trains are. So actually, even before we get to, you know, AI and automatic train operation, I think there's a huge benefit to be had.
Yeah.
In modernisation, and that brings benefits, I think, in capacity utilisation, in loading, in productivity, but it also helps our workforce to, you know, to recruit people who are the best of the pack. You know, today's graduates want to work in digitally enabled businesses, and we have to keep pushing to get those people to come along. Will we get to automatic train operation? Probably. Some people are, and you know, it's probably easier than automatic road operation to some extent. Is it something we'll get to in the next 5 years? I doubt it, you know, and I think that we shouldn't rule these things out, but there's a lot of ground to be covered en route.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Sadly, that is all the time we've got today, Maggie. Thank you very much for your presentation and for your answers there. Clearly, a lot of opportunities for rail freight, so let's hope growth can continue. And I look forward to seeing the sector transform as we move forward.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Craig.
you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.